Yuval Noah Harari är världens idag mest kända intellektuella. Han är i grund och botten historiker. Men i vårt samtal så tittar han inte bara bakåt på vår historia utan framåt, mot framtiden och försöker förstå hur vi ska leva med någonting som är smartare än oss själva. Alltså AI. So we went to California and we met with a woman who is in her 20s and she has a relationship to a bot in her phone. She feels that this relationship is really rewarding for her. What are your thoughts when you hear something like that?
First of all, that it's possible. That it's possible now technologically to create a machine that would get to know us so well and would be able to communicate with language and maybe images and audio so convincingly that it can create fake intimacy. And of course, it's a big debate. Is it fake intimacy or real intimacy? From the side of the person, it's real intimacy. You could feel the same feelings, the same emotions as when you are relating to a family member or a loved one. Of course, from the other side, there are no emotions. But the machine is able to fake intimacy with us. And before we start thinking, is it good, is it bad, what are the dangers, just acknowledge this moment in history when this is suddenly possible.
Right. She knew that it doesn't love her back, but she felt that it provides me positive energy, and she had a job where she had to put on a mask. And now she had a relationship that was totally based on her needs.
And you know, the thing about these AIs is that one of the things that make it difficult for us in human relationships is that the other side has emotions. So they don't always see us, they don't always focus on us because they are caught up in their own emotions. They come back from work and they are grumpy and because something that the boss yelled at them, and they don't see us. It will never happen to a machine. A machine has it's never angry, it's never grumpy, it's never sad, so it always focuses 100% on us and gets to know us very deeply and never forgets anything. So in a way, it's in a frightening way, in a dangerous way, it's kind of realizing a very old human dream to have somebody who focuses entirely on me. No human being she will meet will be able to focus on her and to listen to her and to understand her in the way that the AI is able to do it. Because there is always this kind of barrier that a real human being will miss some things, will be distracted, will be angry, will be sad. So, you know, if we build these kinds of relationships with machines, maybe we become less and less tolerant towards the frailties, the weaknesses, the problems of flesh and blood individuals. And of course, you know, in some ways, it's not the first time in history that humans are building these types of relationships. We have a lot of precedents in religion that people for thousands of years tell you that the most important relationship in their life is not with another human being, but it's with this entity that they claim cares about them and loves them, and some people will say it's just a fantasy in your mind, but it was still for millions of people the most important relationship of their life. And you know, the amazing thing is about relationships with gods and angels and things like that, they never really talked to us. It was we had to do both parts.
Yeah.
But with the AI, it can actually talk back to us. So you can think about it like a god that actually talks with you.
You have spoken so clearly about how our brains are wired for stories, and as a consequence, vulnerable to stories, conspiracy theories.
Yes, we are basically storytelling animals. The reason that we control the world is because we can build these large networks of cooperation. Individually, we are not much better than a chimpanzee or an elephant or anything else. So why do we control the world and not the chimpanzees? Because we can build networks of cooperation in which millions, even billions of people cooperate, and the chimpanzees can't. And we do that with stories. At the basis of every nation, religion, corporation, trade network, you always find stories about gods, about the national history, about currencies, economic theories, whatever. And the way that our minds interpret the whole world in our own life, it's built on the basis, on the blueprint of a relatively small number of stories. And they were mostly constructed or written by evolution long before we came on the scene. Like in the life of every mammal, the first and to some extent the most crucial relationship is with your parent and especially your mother. So the deepest fear of every mammal is to be abandoned, to lose or to be abandoned by your mother, by your parents. And we see so many stories in human history are built around this fear. I mean, so many movies and blockbusters and novels are about a child who loses or fears losing his parents or being mistreated by parents, all these fairy tales about the evil stepmother and so forth. And this is still, if you want to kind of press the emotional buttons of people in the 21st century, this is still the way to do it. And similarly, you have these stories about sibling rivalry. Like every mythology, Cain and Abel and King Lear, all the way to a TV series like Succession, they are about siblings fighting for the love of father loves me more than he loves you. Like, you know, the Jewish people, the story we tell ourselves about who we are father's favorite children. This is the collective story of they go around the world, he loves us more than he loves anybody else. And of course, many nations tell the same story. Like everybody is convinced that they are father's favorite children. And this is such a powerful story. But of course, it also makes us very vulnerable to manipulations. If you get to know these kind of how to press the emotional buttons of humans, you can play on entire populations like you play a piano. For the first time in history, there is something, a machine, that can create new stories, at least on a level with human beings, and perhaps even better. We don't know what the consequences will be. For thousands of years, humans have been living not in a natural environment, but living kind of cocooned inside culture. Everything we do, everything we experience is mediated through our culture. The stories, the songs, the poems, the theater plays, the fashion, the food we eat, the tools, it's all cultural artifacts. Until today, all cultural artifacts were the product of the human mind. Nothing else on earth could create these things. Now there is something. Now AI is able and will become more and more better and better at it in the next few years to create stories and songs and TV series and new trends in fashion and new tools. And what would it mean to live inside a cocoon woven by a non-human intelligence, which on the one hand is not limited by our evolutionary programming, and on the other hand knows how to press our emotional buttons perhaps better than any human being.
But now AI can create stories, and it can perhaps create stories that we can't. And they can understand us in a way, and as a consequence, manipulate us in a way that hasn't been possible before.
Yeah, you can now create kind of fake intimacy on a massive scale, which was never possible before in history. If you look at big propaganda machines throughout history, you think about, I don't know, Nazi propaganda. So they could make every German listen on the radio to a speech by Hitler. But this was not an intimate connection. They could control attention, but not intimacy. If you even look at what happened with social media over the last 10 years, we saw a battle for attention. The big battle between Facebook and TikTok and YouTube and all that, it was a battle for attention, how to grab your attention. Now the battlefront is shifting from attention to intimacy. It's not just about grabbing your attention, it's about creating mass-scale intimacy, like having an army of bots who get to know millions, hundreds of millions of people on a very deep, intimate level, building relationships. You have a friend online that you talk with for weeks, for months. They know so much about you. You share so much. You think it's a human being. You care what they think about you. You're swayed by their opinions on politics, on whatever, and it's a bot. Now, previously, this was like science fiction. Nobody can do that on a massive scale. To take an analogous case, one of the big moments of the AI revolution was when AlphaGo defeated Lee Sedol at the game of Go back in 2016. And Go is a kind of board game, a bit like chess, but much more complex than chess, which was invented in ancient China, like 3,000 years ago. And for 3,000 years, tens of millions of people have been playing Go all over East Asia, also in Korea, Japan. It was considered one of the arts that every educated person needs to know how to play Go. And there were entire schools of thoughts, philosophies, strategies, how to play Go. And it was also seen as a kind of mirror or metaphor for how to live life. And then AlphaGo came along, and within a few weeks, taught itself. I mean, humans didn't teach any strategies to the AlphaGo. It just taught itself how to play Go. And then it smashed Lee Sedol, and one of the world champions. But the amazing thing was what type of strategies, of moves it played. There was a moment, I think in the second game, I think it was move number 37 or something.
Exactly,
that it played a move, and all the experts said, this is ridiculous.
Must have made a mistake.
It must have made a mistake. And later on, it turned out to be one of the most brilliant moves ever in the history of Go. And what we realized is that for 3,000 years, because of the limitations of our organic brains, we were limited to a certain, like if you think about the space of all the ways you can play Go, we were on an island and couldn't get off the island because our brain just couldn't think in different ways, in radically alien ways. So for 3,000 years, humans are stuck on this island of Go, playing only in this way. And then AlphaGo comes and says, hey, you can play here, you can play there. So you can say, oh, this is Go, it's not so important. But this is going to happen in more and more fields. In music, in the composition of texts, in politics, in religion. It's going to explore more and more territories outside the small island that we have, the cultural island, that we have explored over thousands of years. It could have good consequences, of course. I mean, it's good to have new ways to play Go, to play music or whatever. But it could also be terrifying to think about living in basically it's an alien culture. A culture created by the acronym AI usually stands for artificial intelligence. But I think it's better to think about it as standing for alien intelligence, because AI is becoming less and less artificial. When you think what is artificial, it's something that we create and control. It does only what we thought about and tell it to do. AI, with every passing year, it's less artificial. Yes, we kind of write the code, design the baby AIs, but it's like human babies. When they grow, they explore the world, and they learn things that their parents never taught them.
And eventually they revolt.
And eventually they revolt, yeah. So we are now creating these kinds of alien intelligences that are learning things that we never taught them, and we can't even think about these things. It's an alien way of looking at the world, and they are going to increasingly shape the world.
We went to the robotics team at MIT, and they had a robot that looked like a little dog. It could run anywhere. Mm-hmm. And they said, push it over, and I did, and it just shook itself, and it was back on its feet again. And I said, how does it do that? And they said, we don't know. we trained the AI, and it figured out in a simulation, and now we don't know how it does it. And that was a recurring theme, regardless of whether we met the robotics team or where we went. They say, we don't know how it does it. It learned by itself.
This is really, again, like parents and babies. I mean, yes, you created it in some way in the first place, but then it does all kinds of things that you don't know how it learned to do this or to think about that. Now, I also hear people that say, oh, it's not really creative. It's not coming up with any new ideas. It's just taking our ideas and recombines them. Like ChatGPT, it writes a text. It just learns how humans write texts and then combines different elements. But this is what I do as an author. Yeah. You know, I learned language by reading the texts of other people. I learned all kinds of literary tricks and ideas and examples by reading Thucydides and Shakespeare and whatever. And now I combine it to compose a new text. And people tell me that I'm creative. So if I'm creative, so when ChatGPT does the same thing, it is also creative. You think about finance. So when people think about creativity, they think about art, music. But finance is also a field of human creativity. Money and bonds and all these kinds of financial devices, they are creations of human beings. And what happens if now AIs start to create new financial devices? And, you know, finance, when you look at physical behavior in the world, like with the robot, this is something that still AI struggles with. Like if you want AI to pick up these glasses and wash them, very difficult, because the physical world is messy. But finance, it's only data. It's pure information. The ideal world for AI is finance. It's only information in, information out. And what happens if AIs, it's already happening that more and more of the trade in the world is being done by AIs, not by human traders. And if they start coming up with new financial devices and new financial strategies that nobody understands. So what happens to human politics when humans lose control of the financial system because they can no longer understand all the devices, the financial devices that the AIs created?
We saw what happened in 2008 when the world economy was pushed to the brink by these
CDOs, yeah?
Yeah, that was made by men.
Exactly.
There are many interviews with you online, and there's a few interviews with me online, and we had a discussion before that was filmed. How does the viewer know that it's you and I talking?
Today, they don't. I mean, you know, 2 years ago when we met in Oslo, they could be sure that it's real people, because AIs weren't sophisticated enough to fake videos and also to fake content on such a level. But now, or in a year or two, it will be impossible just by looking at a video to know whether this is the real person or real people, or whether this is the creation of AI. So, you know, the same way we talked about finance, the same way that for thousands of years, people could fake money, could counterfeit money. So states had very strict laws against counterfeiting money, because obviously, if you don't have strict laws against it, the fake money will drive out the real money and the financial system would collapse. It's the same now with fake people. For the first time in history, it is technically possible to create fake people. So we need very strict regulations against it. Otherwise, the social systems will collapse. If you no longer can trust whether you're talking with a human being or an AI, then trust evaporates. And without trust, there is no society.
That's such a powerful thing you can't believe what you see on a screen, whether it's a picture or a film clip or it's audio, any more than you could believe a painting.
Yeah, or maybe like a quotation. Like if you read a text and you see their quotation marks, like President Biden said, quotation marks, blah, 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 Everybody knows that just because there are quotation marks, it doesn't prove that Biden really said it. I need some kind of institution, authority, like a credible newspaper, to stand behind it and say, yes, this is an exact quotation. Like if you read in the New York Times, and it says in quotation marks, Biden said blah, 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 you trust it because you trust the New York Times. If you just read it in a blog, anybody can fake it. Now videos are becoming a bit like quotation marks. Just because you see it in a video doesn't mean it's real. The question is, what is the institution, what is the authority that gives its kind of stamp of approval?
But is society ready for this?
We have no choice.
If it's a lot of risks involved in this, we could just pull the brakes, or at least...
We can't. There is no way to stop development of AI, partly because there are also wonderful things it can do for us. It can provide us with the best healthcare system in history. It can help us solve climate change. It can do so many things. And even if we decide, no, it's too dangerous, there is an arms race. If one country decides to stop all development of AI, but other countries go along, then you haven't achieved anything. And given the state of the world now, with the rising international tensions and so forth, I don't see any kind of global agreement about effectively stopping or significantly slowing down the development of AI. So yeah, there are huge dangers.
So what do you say then to the ones who say that this is just the same scaremongering that we've heard for every technological innovation, like the printing press, the telephone, and so on?
That it was really scary. People were right to be scared because there were disasters with the previous technologies. You look at the printing revolution in early modern Europe, people say, oh, the printing press, it brought about the scientific revolution. No, most people didn't read Galileo. What it brought about was the wars of religion, and it brought about the big witch hunts. The biggest bestsellers of early modern Europe were not Copernicus and Galileo. It was witch hunting. And the same with radio and the kind of 19th century and 20th century technologies. Yes, they were put to terrible use by people like Hitler and Stalin and so forth. And, people say, yes, there were problems. In the end, we got it right. As a historian, my concern is about the process, how you got there.
It's always the first generation that pays the price for every new technology.
And if we have to go through the same kind of failed experiments with AI and brain-computer interfaces, the consequences could be catastrophic. You think about the warnings that people had in the 19th century about the Industrial Revolution. They were right to a large extent. Yes. We look back from today and we say, thank God for the Industrial Revolution, we now have a much better life than in the 18th century. And that's true. But we forget that in order to learn how to build good industrial societies, people had to go through some terrible experiments. If you think about, for instance, communist dictatorships, they were an experiment in how to build an industrial society. Many people thought this is the best way to make use of all these trains and electricity and radio. Yes, Stalin is right. And only after, tens of millions of victims, it became apparent, no, this is not the ideal way. And the same with European imperialism. People said, when you, in the old days, as an agrarian, pre-industrial society, you don't have to build an empire, because you're largely autarkic. But now with industry, to build a functioning industrial society, you must have control of the raw materials, the coal, the iron, the rubber, and you must have control of the markets. Therefore, the only viable industrial society is an empire. And this idea was accepted by many people in Britain, in France, in Belgium, in Russia, in Japan, in the United States. And you saw this rush to conquer the world, to build empires. We now look back and we say, oh, this was a mistake. It not only caused death and destruction and exploitation on a massive scale, it was also simply wrong. You don't need an empire. You can build a perfectly good industrial society without an empire. So if now with AI, we have to go through the same process of people will say, well, you know, the only way to build this AI society is we need a strong totalitarian control, and we have to go through decades of totalitarianism until it turns out that this is wrong, the consequences could be catastrophic.
And the tech industry has been very successful in presenting the narrative that either you are for technology and progress or you're against it. You're a Luddite, you want to break. But I think that's the wrong narrative. It's not whether you are for or against technology, it's whether the technology is for or against the user.
Exactly.
So people who start to present the dangers, as you have done so clearly, are sometimes accused of being Luddites or breaks. I've been accused of that myself.
I'm not saying that we should stop developing these technologies, partly because I think it's impossible, and partly because I think they have some very positive potential.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that we shouldn't believe in technological determinism, that we have to develop this particular technology. We always have a choice. You know, if you're an engineer and you're working on, I don't know, new surveillance tools, you can create a new tool that helps governments and corporations monitor citizens and customers, and you can create the opposite tool. The technology doesn't tell you what specific tool to create. This is your choice. Yeah. And personally, I benefit a lot from all these new technologies. For instance, I met my husband online 22 years ago. We met in one of the first chat rooms for LGBTQ people in the early 2000s. And this was amazing because, you know, one of the things about gay people, growing up gay, is that this is a very dispersed community. A lot of minorities in history, at least they had the advantage that you're born into a family, a community, a neighborhood where everybody belongs to the same community. Like if you're a Jew in the Middle Ages or in 100 years ago, and you're born in Sweden or Germany or wherever, so okay, you're just 1% of the population, but at least your family, your friends, your neighbors are likely to be Jewish. You know many Jews. But when you're born gay, you're not usually born into a gay family, in a gay neighborhood. So just getting to know other gay men was a huge difficulty, especially in what was then a very homophobic society in Israel in the 1980s and 1990s. And then the internet came along, and all these kind of online communities, and suddenly it became much easier to find each other. And this was and I'm grateful for the engineers and the entrepreneurs that created this technology. So definitely it's not all bad. I tend to speak more about the dangerous scenarios, partly because the entrepreneurs speak all the time about the positive scenarios.
There's no shortage in people who are speaking about the positive side.
So somebody needs to balance it.
You think a lot about these topics, and how do you protect yourself against the negative consequences of AI?
I mean, there are two main things. One is to get to know my own mind as well as I can. Because all these manipulations, they work by getting to know and exploit our own weaknesses. And if you make the effort to know yourself, to know your own weaknesses, it gives you some measure of protection against these manipulations. The oldest advice in the book, get to know yourself better. The second thing is to keep some kind of an information diet. You know, lots of people have a food diet. They are very mindful of what they eat, which is important. You know, you don't want to eat too much, it's not good for you. You don't want to eat junk food, it's not good for you. It's the same with information. Information is the food of the mind. The idea that more information is always good for you, that's ridiculous. It's like thinking that more food is always good for you. Not true. And similarly, you have to be very mindful what kind of information you're putting into your mind. If you feed your mind constantly, you know, with outrage and anger and fear, you'll get a sick mind. So you have to be very careful. And also very important, like with food, you need time to digest. Time when you don't take in more information, that's it for now, and now I need to digest.
You take a couple of hours every day off?
Couple of hours, sometimes couple of days. I go every year for a long meditation retreat of 1 month or 2 months, when I completely disconnect from no emails, not even books, no telephones, nothing. And of course, I know that for most people, this is, this is really extreme. But I would recommend for everyone to, a day a week or a couple of days or a month in which you completely disconnect. You don't have to meditate. You can go take a hike in the woods or do whatever works for you, but don't take in more information. Let your mind kind of digest and detoxify and find a new balance.